Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, author of Chorus of a Thousand, now available on Amazon. Today, doing something a little bit different. We're not talking about a book, we are not talking about a film or films, anything like that. We are talking about a video game, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So I know I've streamed a time or two on this channel, probably not as frequently as I think as I should, um, but I've probably made passing references to games and whatnot in my book reviews, but I recently finished Breath of the Wild for the first time, and I just wanted to talk about it because I feel like this is one of those games that you have to talk about when you complete it. Even and I had a whole bunch of opinions all throughout as well. Um, so I guess a background into my experience and familiarity with The Legend of Zelda as a series. So, um, when I was younger, obviously, even though my family, we never had, a GameCube as it came out or the Wii. I had a lot of friends growing up that had GameCubes and Wii's, and one of the big games I remember was when Twilight Princess came out in like 2006. I remember that very vividly, like that whole ad campaign, seeing it on TV all the time, kind of leading up to that, and it was a launch game with the Wii in November, December, whenever that was in 2006. Um, Now, I think I had played, on a friend's Game Boy or something. It might have been, thinking back to it. I think it was A Link to the Past. I played a little bit of A Link to the Past on a friend's Game Boy. Only played a little bit of it, and this was before I had my first handheld console I ever had was a Nintendo DS. Um, and so I didn't play it that much, and then my family, we did have a Nintendo 64 that we only had a handful of games for. It wasn't the only console we had, but it was the only Nintendo home console that I had growing up. And of course we had GoldenEye 007. That's one of my favorite games of all time. It's what got me into the James Bond movies. I'm a huge James Bond fan. So yeah, the GoldenEye, that's a game that needs no introduction in and of itself. It's a perfect game. That game is excellent. Of course, Mario Kart 64. That's a classic as well. And then we also had Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time, Ocarina. I've always called it the Ocarina of Time. I will continue to call that, even if it is Ocarina of Time. But Ocarina of Time had that. But I didn't. Admittedly, I have great nostalgia for the opening sections of the game, and by opening sections, I literally mean when you're in the forest in the beginning, the Deku Tree, and Hyrule Castle, and Lon Lon Ranch, and all of those areas. I have nostalgia for those because as a kid, I never really played enough. I didn't play the game enough to get past those points. Now, flash forward, well over 10, 15, pretty much close to 20 years later, and I as you get older, and then you kind of enter into the working world, and you have or you enter into adulthood, and have the freedom to kind of get certain things, try certain things, and I wanted a Switch, and there were a lot of Nintendo games that I had never experienced before, or franchises that I wanted to return to, and just try out a little bit. And so I got a Switch Lite, not a home, not one that I can easily play on the TV, but I had a Switch Lite, and this was the first game I got for it. Now this was about, I would say, 4 years ago or so was when I got the Switch, and I got Breath of the Wild, and I started playing it, and I really got into it, but it was a game that frustrated the hell out of me. Anyone who has played Breath of the Wild even for a little bit knows when you just feel like you're running up against a wall, and it's just, you run out of stamina, or you get one shotted by like 10,000 enemies that are out there. It's those little frustrations that can just compound over time, but I think that the key to my enjoyment then, and ultimately what became my enjoyment recently, um, was when you just it's a game to just casually dive into it. If you're going in, I mean, you can go in with a certain intent, and that's what as the end game started to literally mount up, and as I was preparing to be like, okay, I'm gonna at least beat the main story. Um, that's when you have to, like, I think, plan a little more. But I think that the heart and soul of Breath of the Wild is obviously when you're just out there and you're just exploring, you're just running around, you're just seeing what's out there, and that is when the game can take on such a relaxing element, and that's where the strength, that's where the beauty of the game, I think, really, they really come about, they really pop well. um, and obviously Breath of the Wild is, I love open world games. And I when I first played this 4 years ago, I don't think I appreciated it enough then, and I don't even know if I still do, but I'm starting to see that more clearly. I mean, 4 years ago I played through Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, Red Dead 2 is, I would say that's in the top three. I would say my top three, if I don't know if I've gotten into this on the channel before, but I might as well say that now. My top, for I guess, for reference, in terms of like what my interests are and what I like with games, I would say my top three of all time, in no particular order. I'll just say them in release order. Um, the first Metal Gear Solid, which was originally released for the PS1 in, I think, 1998. So the first Metal Gear Solid, um, I just I can't get enough of that game. That game is so damn good. It was like light years. I mean, that whole franchise was like light years ahead of its time in terms of the geopolitical themes it explored, the sociological themes, and it just has a great story. Great story. It has a lot of humor, which I didn't expect when I got into Metal Gear Solid, and it's so good. And it's like, it's I mean, it's like playing through a James Bond movie. But a James Bond movie that is so acutely in tune with, making a commentary on genetics, on history, on politics, on human nature. It's something in a depth that was just right for that kind of. I mean, it was on the surface level, you know, a James Bond esque espionage, action adventure, stealth type game. But then you really get into the nitty gritty of it, and that's something that, of course, is expanded later on. So anyway, that's one of the top three. The second is the first Dark Souls. Um, I played that game probably about 3 4 years ago. Man, I really got into it. I played that whole thing. It was a lot. It's kind of embarrassing to look back on and think how much time I put into that game in such a it was like 2 weeks, 65 hours, I think, which is like an average of 4 hours a day. Kind of embarrassing, but I loved that game so much. And in terms of how the hero's journey, the broader, whatever, the Joseph Campbell, Hero of a Thousand Faces, how that journey was then how then I you literally walk through that journey. I mean, obviously in many video games, but I found it to be done the absolute best in that first Dark Souls game. Just perfect. Even though you freaking get to Ornstein and Smo and you want to throw the controller against the wall and break the TV, but I love that game to pieces. It's absolute perfection. And then the third, or at least the most recently released, would be, yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2. Came out about 6 years ago in 2018. That one is it's I did not like the first Red Dead Redemption. I played through that. Around the time it came out, I didn't like it. Um, but Red Dead 2 I think was everything I was looking for in that kind of an open world game, that type of a western setting. But then I think it had I I I honestly I think it had a better story than the first game. I know that that might be sacrilegious and blasphemous to a lot of people to say that the second one had a better story than the first, but I think it did. Um, Arthur Morgan is just one of the all-time great protagonists, and just how that game develops, and then the epilogue. I just love that. You don't those little moments of joy and just reflection in a game that you get in Red Dead 2. I don't I haven't often gotten in games. But anyway, so that's kind of the reference point for what I'm going with. So Red Dead 2 came out after Breath of the Wild, in fact, and I know that the team in making Tears of the Kingdom, which I have not played yet, they I think they said that they were actually inspired by parts of the open world design in Red Dead 2. So I'll be interested eventually here, hopefully soon, when I play Tears of the Kingdom, to discover that for myself. Now, so again, I played Breath of the Wild. I probably put like 40, 45 hours into it over the course of a few months 4 years ago. So over the course of a few, but that was very concentrated. I played it for a short amount of time, played a lot of it, and then I put it down for like a month, maybe would play a lot of it. And that's kind of how I am with games sometimes. I'm not a constant, a daily gamer. I'm not. I prefer to spend my time reading more than anything else. And so video games are like third, fourth, fifth on the list for me. But when I get into them, I really get into them, and I'm able to just kind of spend a lot of time. Like a rainy weekend, in my mind that's perfect for playing a game. Um, but I played it. I played a lot of it, and then I I think the frustrations ebbed over. I was able to see the light, and then I decided, instead of just I think by that point I was aimlessly exploring. I was doing some of the shrines, not really with a plan. I was just doing shrines to kind of, get stamina improvements, get more heart containers, things like that. And then there are the divine beasts in Breath of the Wild, and so I went after three of them. I don't remember the exact names of the divine beasts, but the elephant, the bird, and the lizard or the gecko, whatever the hell that one on the volcano is. I got three of them, and then I went after the camel in Garu in near in the Gerudo area in the desert of the world, and got all the way through those that dungeon, all the way through the puzzles, the obstacles, the mini bosses, and everything, and then I got to Thunderblight Ganon. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the way that Breath of the Wild works, which is, I think it is completely unique and hasn't doesn't really have a predecessor like it, in at least in the Zelda series. Maybe I'm sure in other games there are a lot of parallels, but with Breath of the Wild, you start out, um, and you have a starting area, like a lot of games have. You have a starting area, and you essentially learn the core mechanics of the game. You learn like that you can freeze time for some objects. You can freeze objects. You can like have these big ice blocks rise out of the water, and you also have, through kind of, I think it's a watch, or through your like this iPad esque device, you have magnetic powers too. And so those are all demonstrated through these shrines. Now you complete shrines to receive spirit orbs, and then when you complete four shrines, you can essentially exchange those spirit orbs for another heart container. So you add a heart of health, or you can add more stamina. I think total in the game there are like 120 shrines. It's insane. There's a ton. And right when you get out of the starting area, probably the biggest compliment I can pay this game is that it is the ultimate choose your own adventure. You have access to every single area in the game right from the start. It's just, where do you want to go? You can you can go straight for Hyrule Castle and try to take on the final boss in the game. You can end the game in less than, I mean, not if you're, I mean, if you're speed running, obviously you can like blow through there in a matter of minutes. But if you're just playing at a more normal pace, you can in an hour or two. If you're really, really good, in an hour or two, you could beat the whole game. Or you could, like me, take over 50 hours of taking your time. Um, because, you can go after the divine beasts, and when you get to Hyrule Castle, you face off against five aspects of Ganon, or Ganondorf, the perpetual antagonist in the Zelda series. And if you choose to go for the divine beasts, which are kind of in the four corners of the map, um, you defeat those respective aspects of Ganon in each of the divine beasts. So if you restore all four, when you get to Hyrule Castle, you only have to defeat Calamity Ganon, that final aspect of Ganon. Plus, if you get a lot of cool weapons for getting through the divine beasts, a lot of cool perks. You get heart containers, and you get special powers. Rivali's Gale, Mifa's Grace, the rock guy thing, the extra shield, and then not is it Garuda's Fury or Shiva's Fury, or something like that. But you get Fury for attack, so you get a defensive one, an attacking one, a restoration one, and then one that allows you to kind of get a boost of air to fly and glide and evade. Um, so you can do whatever you can decide to do all 120 shrines. Never do one of the divine beasts and go to the castle. You can just do the divine beasts, go to the castle, never do a shrine. Or you could spend your entire time looking for the Korok seeds, all 990 something or however many there are. You could spend your whole time just doing that, or crafting weapons, or trying to figure out all the possible recipes you can make through all the food items you can find. So it is the ultimate choose your own adventure. That's the biggest compliment I can pay Breath of the Wild, is that it's the ultimate in that aspect. But with that, it can be very frustrating at times, because when you're given access to everything, it doesn't mean it still means that there will be points where you have to stop and really think through a jam you're in. You're not going to have enough stamina to get to where you want to get. So what are some ways that you can get around that? You probably still can find a way to get there, but you have to really stop and think. It's not just mindless, you can go where you want. And that was frustrating for me, and it took just a little bit of self-talk, just reminding myself, okay, you can do that. Now, again, to kind of go back, I got to the Camel Divine Beast, got to Thunderblight Ganon. And this was before I had played Dark Souls, and I had become less frustrated by difficult bosses and more intrigued. And it's a game, it's a freaking game. It's not like that big of a deal, but I just got to Thunderblight Ganon, and I tried and tried and tried. And I mean, there were fundamental game mechanics like parrying, which I didn't even remember were a thing. So some fundamental mechanics that aren't that difficult to pull off, just wasn't applying. And so I put the game down, and life happens, and you forget about things. If it's not, and it eventually it faded from my mind. I didn't anticipate that it would fade from my mind pretty much completely for 4 years, and I never really thought about returning to the game until this past weekend, when I had pulled out my Switch again, wiped the dust off of it, and I got the Nintendo 64 expansion, started playing Ocarina of Time again. But then I was like, there's Breath of the Wild, and it's been kind of still at the back of my mind a little bit. Why don't I try why don't I go after it? Let's just see what happens, because it's been 4 years. And it took a few tries, but I was able, like literally a few tries, and I defeated Thunderblight Ganon. And I'm like, okay, then let's go for the end. So I was able to get to 13 hearts, got the Master Sword, um, and then went into Hyrule Castle. Got and this was all within, I think, from then Thunderblight Ganon to then at the end of the game for me. I only really had about 7 or 8 hours left. That's how long I took. But I was kind of thorough. I made a lot of the mighty durian recipes, a whole bunch of like buffing with attack recipes and defense recipes to just kind of prepare myself. Got a lot of arrows and weapons and everything, and then went to Hyrule Castle. I got the Hylian shield from that spot in the basement, and then I went up, and it took me 2 times to defeat Calamity Ganon. The first time, because I died because when he gets to that second phase, and it's you have to kind of break through that like defensive buff he puts over himself, and so I did like that the Fury charge, and it just I because it's one of those where you just have to figure out how to do something, and if it's not apparent, you just have to figure it out with the boss. So it took me, 2 attempts to go after Calamity Ganon. And this was just hopping back into the game on a weekend after 4 years of just reacquainting myself with it quickly and then being like, okay, we can do this. We can go to the end. And I did. And I think by the end, I had, I think 13 permanent hearts, maybe a 1 3/4 wheels worth of stamina, maybe 40-ish shrines. A couple Korok seeds, not a lot. Yeah, all 4 divine beasts, and that was my. I mean, it was a little bit of a long-winded path to the end, but I was struck by it, and in that my frustration I think was misplaced, and but ultimately the feeling that I got away from this was just it's a very great game. It's practically an incredible game. I mean, it is like all the praise. I mean, this Breath of the Wild is a game that has had an insane amount of praise heaped upon it, and you see its influence constantly throughout the industry now, and will continue to for many years to come in many different games, as developers and designers are influenced by it, and its philosophy of just how it lets the player opens the door and says, "Go for it. You can do whatever you want in whatever order. Just the world it's your oyster. Go for it." So that's where it gets all the credit too. I didn't get a lot of the memories, so part aspects of the story I did not get, but yet at the same time, it is in respect like the original Dark Souls. I know that the comparison of Soulsborne games to others is probably very long-winded and tired by this point, but I think it bears some comparisons to the fact that with Dark Souls, a lot of the story within that is through flavor text, through your optional interactions with the environment. It's not front and center. And with this game, while the story is front words, it's not pervasive. You don't but you can still get enjoyment out of it, and you can kind of you can feel like Link. You can feel kind of the weight of that hero through that hero's journey on its own, with not even necessarily with all of the story components that are out there. So I appreciated that as well. With that said, excuse me. With that said, this is the first Zelda game that I've beaten, or I've beaten the main story, the main quest. And I've already gone back, and I'm a little ways through Ocarina of Time. Maybe I'll have a review on that shortly. Or within maybe the next few weeks, who knows? And I hope to dive into the other ones. Majora's Mask. It's one that I've always heard a lot about since I was a kid. Never played it. And then Tears of the Kingdom. I think if I liked this, I've heard from a lot of people that Tears of the Kingdom does what this does, and it arguably does it better. So excited for that. So with that said, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Let me know what you think of it, and as always, I will see you guys next time.